Oh, hi! You just caught me in the middle of filing my taxes. The very first episode of Mypowerbob Talks Films is about to start. I hope you got your snacks, your drinks. It's going to be one hell of an episode. So, sit back and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome and hello to the very first episode of Mypowerbob Talks Films. Yeah! So, to commemorate this important occasion, I'm going to let today's topic be picked by pure chance. Wait a second, I don't own a set of darts. Oh, well, alright. I guess I gotta do with the backup instead. Alright, fine. Rant it is. That's gonna make for a good first video, and I know exactly what to rant about. You see, I have this pet peeve that's kind of odd, but also kind of justified in my opinion. And that pet peeve is about movie titles. There is a lot I have to say about this topic, but before I get to that, I feel like there's a need to talk about why movie titles are so important. The title of a movie is one of the most important aspects of its advertising. In almost every case, a movie title is the very first thing you see. Streaming services have them up front in a thumbnail, YouTube have them in the video title, social media posts start out with the name. The only consistent case where they aren't up front is when the trailer plays in a cinema or on TV. What? It's him? Of course, sometimes there's a twist in the system, such as with the Avengers Endgame teaser, where the YouTube video only says Avengers 4, while the subtitle that is Endgame is revealed at the end of the video. This is honestly a great way of revealing subtitles, but at the end of the day you still know it's about the Avengers, and that's the important part of the title anyway. The subtitle Endgame is not gonna change an audience member's mind. The title of a movie is what often determines if a person wants to see a movie or not, especially when scrolling through them on streaming services, like most of us do. If a title is boring or blends into the crowd, a person will just keep on scrolling. So that's why movie titles need to be eye-catching, intriguing, and convey what the movie is about. But that's easier said than done. Movie titles have many layers to them. Some are metaphorical. Oh man. And some titles are a bit more literal. Oh man! Some titles may also subvert the expectation the title first imprints on you. Take for example, The Last Jedi. Throughout the movie, you think the Jedi in question is Luke, but then near the end of the movie itself, he explains that it is in fact Rey that is the Last Jedi. Shortly summarized, a movie's title can often make or break whether a person will give it the time of day or not. Hello? Yes, hello. What are some examples of good titles? Why am I asking this? Ah, that's a great question, random caller. Now, I should probably preface this by saying that people are different. They have different opinions and interests, and that will affect whether a movie title appeals to them or not. The following things I'm going to say are subjective opinions, although I'm very confident that many will agree to them nonetheless. So, here are some movie titles I think are great. Starting off, the James Bond franchise is the one that always comes to mind first when I ponder upon this topic. Almost every single title is intriguing and makes me want to watch it. Live and Let Die, You Only Live Twice, License to Kill, The World Is Not Enough, Skyfall, all amazing titles that get me watching, and they're just a few examples. Almost every title in the franchise grabs me by the interest bone. The bone is located right here. The movies may not always be that good, but by then it's too late to turn away. The title are ambiguous enough to capture interest, while also being vague enough that whatever happens in the movie will somehow make the title make sense. They're not perfect though, and I'll come back to that later. As you might already have noticed, I lean towards the longer movie titles. For this reason, I firmly believe that subtitle sequels are better than numbered sequels. I'll watch this one. Oh man, I should have picked the other one. However, there are cases where the movie title puts a spin on the number method, which makes it interesting again. For example, by incorporating the number into the subtitle, by overcomplicating it for shits and giggles, or by spicing up the delivery of the number. Oh man, I bought a French dub. Now, of course, when a sequel doesn't have a number, people might get confused and won't realize it's a sequel. But I'm not opposed to having the number along with the subtitle. That's perfectly fine. But to me, subtitles are more important. It's like danger signs. I can really get behind them. The Pirates of the Caribbean franchise all have great subtitles that more or less either clearly convey what the movie is about or utilizes pirate sayings. Except if you live in Europe like I do, which is why I refuse to buy a copy of the fifth movie. Like seriously, I get that Salazar's Revenge is a way more accurate description of the plot, but come on, Dead Men Tell No Tales is such a good saying, it almost makes up for how the bad movie is. Another franchise handling their titles better than the movie quality is the Die Hard franchise. Die Hard with a Vengeance, Live Free and Die Hard, A Good Day to Die Hard. I'm an absolute sucker for when the main title is incorporated into a bigger sentence for a sequel title, and these ones are almost good enough to make me forget how hard the franchise fell by the later entries. A good thing comedies often do is parody popular movie titles. Austin Powers is the obvious example for this, The Spy Who Shagged Me and Goldmember being spins on The Spy Who Loved Me and Goldfinger. Now, in general, I find that the genre with the best movie title overall is the Western genre. The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Blazing Saddles, Django Unchained, The Quick and the Dead, Fistful of Dollars, True Grit. The titles in this genre almost always go hard and also pretty clearly informs you about the plot. It's just great. And the only genre that rival its glory is the old school film noir genre. The Postman Always Rings Twice, Kiss Me Deadly, The Lady from Shanghai, Double Indemnity, Shadow of a Doubt, Out of the Past. The genre gets really creative with its wording, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Its offspring genre, neo-noir, is just as good in its naming schemes. Blade Runner, Memento, Pulp Fiction, Silence of the Lambs, A History of Violence, and my favorite example, Shutter Island. This movie is a classic example of a story where everything is not as it might first seem, and this is reflected in the title. Shutter Island is actually an anagram for Truths and Lies, which really fits into the movie's theme. Similarly to how the movie Avengers Age of Ultron is an anagram for A Generator's Glove Fun, which is a foreshadowing to Ultron's What If episode. Yellow? Hello, that's fascinating. But what about some examples of bad titles? Sure thing, random caller with a spontaneous question. For good movie titles to exist, bad movie titles sadly have to exist as well. And those are plentiful. So once again, let's start off with the James Bond franchise. And this is where things start to hurt me. You Only Live Twice, as good of a title that is irrelevant. At the very start of the movie, James Bond fakes his own death, and that's what the title is about. He then goes on like it wasn't even important, and the rest of the movie does not reflect the title. No wonder when the movie came to Norway they renamed it to James Bond in Japan. Moonraker? The hell is that? Octopussy? No joke I could make would ever amplify the strangeness of that title. Quantum of Solace sounds kinda cool. But that means nothing to me. It's just big words to make it sound interesting. It's buzzwords, and buzzwords are a plague upon titles. Speaking of buzzwords, A New Hope makes sense. The rebellion finally gets a warrior that can help them defeat the Empire. Empire Strikes Back makes sense. The Empire fights back the rebellion and kinda wins by the end of the movie. Return of the Jedi makes sense. Luke was at a low point when we last saw him, but now he's back to full strength and defeats the Empire. So what the hell does Force Awakens means? The Force is already awake! We've seen it in 6 movies already! The Rise of Skywalker as well! The Skywalkers have existed for generations at this point! JJ Abrams, you're not making episode 1 here! So don't try to introduce stuff we already know! Rise, Destiny, Dawn, Legend, Last, Tale, Life, Revenge, Fallen, all words that are used so often that it loses all impact if not used in a creative way. The longer a title is, the more space for buzzwords there are as well. The incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up with zombies. Who wrote this? Do they think it's quirky? Were they trying to fill out an essay? Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. Why? Do you have so little trust in your movie standing on its own that you gotta make sure the audience knows it's an entry in a 10-movie long franchise? That's its full title, by the way. But do you know what movie does that, but worse? Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Huh? Is this a joke? What do you expect to gain from this except an annoyed audience? Why not just call it Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey? People aren't even gonna bother calling it by its legal name, so why even fluff it up with filler words? I'm Norwegian! I barely even know what emancipation means. Sometimes a title even lies to you, straight up. Gasp. I know, shocker. But there's a difference in lies. The Last Jedi is a good lie, as I talked about earlier. Age of Ultron is a less good lie. The movie doesn't span an age, it takes place over a weekend. But then again, age is just another filler buzzword, and most audiences don't expect a literal age to pass. But some movies, however, sow an expectation that justifies the dissatisfaction one might get from a movie. The American. Americans in movies are badass, and this one is played by George Clooney himself. This sounds like it'll be one hardcore movie. He's just sitting there! What a waste of a title! The movie is so slow and it's just him going from cafe to cafe with some underwhelming action sequences sprinkled in between. This isn't The American, it's the Michelin Guide. The title itself isn't even good, I'll get to that in a minute, but it doesn't even live up to what the title is. I can see what the filmmakers wanted to make, they just couldn't execute it well enough. The title is an accidental mislead, and I think a good chunk of bad titles are accidental misleads. The Truman Show is probably my favorite Jim Carrey movie, hands down a must-watch. But for the longest time before seeing it, I thought it was an actual TV show. I wonder why. It makes sense with the context of the story, but you don't have that context if you see the title without knowing about the movie.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania!
There's no wrestling tournament in this. I'm confident the only reason they did this was because you can pick out Ant-Man from the word Quantumania. The Nightmare Before Christmas. Very good movie. Title makes it sound like a Christmas movie though. People like to discuss whether it is that or a Halloween movie, but let's be real, it's objectively a Halloween movie. Here's a famous one from my own home country, Kon-Tiki. Kon-Tiki was the name of an Inca god of the sun. The movie is about an explorer and his raft named Kon-Tiki. It's an absolutely great movie, fascinating title, but it tells the audience absolutely nothing about what the story is about. I could pull out examples both left and right all day, but I seem to be getting yet another spontaneous random call. Blue? Hello, yes, we're just calling you to inform about the suspected credit card fraud. Oh no, that's not good. That's worse than bad. In fact, it's... This is the point where the rant begins. The point that is objectively subjective. I'm very picky about titles, and nothing gets me more annoyed, more miffed, nothing gets my hamster going. Come on, get in the wheel. No, you're ruining my analogy. More than the. Whenever I read a title that starts with the word the, I get exhausted. It reeks of a lack of creativity. It essentially tells me that the filmmakers couldn't bother coming up with a good title and just chose one by opening the dictionary on a random page. What's the correct way to sort movies like this, by the way? Either I ignore the and sort both Suicide Squad movies together, but I don't like the shiny masterpiece touching this piece of filth. But if I sort my movies with the, I have to acknowledge the word in the title. Basically, whenever I talk about these movies, write about them, I just leave out the. In most cases, the title works fine without it. It's just so damn overused. It's like the nose of the entertainment industry. You technically see it, but your brain just ignores it. I myself try very hard to avoid using the in my YouTube videos, and you can see that a lot on my other YouTube channel. Or on this channel if you're watching this video far into the future. Sometimes the appears in the middle of the title, and I can like that. Guardians of the Galaxy. It's good, it sits right with me. Hell, there are cases where the middle the enhances the first the. The Lord of the Rings. It just sounds right, it sounds complete. Sadly, in most cases, the is just used as the first word, and then just as often, it's followed by only a single word. And there is the second big issue I have with titles. Titles that are just the and then a single word is probably the most common template for movie titles. The Mandalorian, The Whale, The Menu, The Goonies, The Boys, The Office, The Sopranos, The Batman, The Flash, The Godfather, The Witcher, and look who it is again! The American! That's 2 more sins! It's going to hell! Finally, I could use for that. There's probably thousands of pages on IMDb with movies using this naming template. It reeks even more of lacking creativity than movies with longer titles starting with the. It's like the difference between a plate of shit and a dead body. Hell, I prefer titles being just a single word more than when it starts with the and then a single word. Look at this. This is such a clean and clear title. Gladiator. You get the point. There's no need for the ugly the in front of it. Of course, I still prefer longer titles. There's just so many more words you can add on to a title to make it convey a clearer image of the movie's contents. If DC can do this to Birds of Prey, then DC are also able to call the Flash movie this. Oh wait, they already did, so just do it again! Anyway, sometimes I genuinely refuse to watch certain movies and shows with such title as The Blank, which I know is petty. The sentence ends there. Movie titles are pretty important. Some people take them more seriously than others. I'm people. Some movies are great, with titles that clearly reflect what happens in them, while also being creative. Some movies are great with bad titles. Some movies are bad with great and clever titles. Some movies and shows are just bad with bad titles. And some movie titles, whether they're good or bad, are just straight up weird. The Shape of Water. I don't need to watch 2 hours of that to know what water looks like. That. Now you see me too. Dude, look out! It's right behind you. What? Where? The brave little toaster. Why does a toaster need to be brave? Here. Take that to Mordor. The boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. And a cat, and a mouse, and a mousetrap, and a farm, and the therapist, and a divorce, and a meds, and an addiction, and a horse, and a puppy. I think you get the point. Of course, this doesn't just apply to movies. It applies to video games, books, music, etc. There's a late 80s movie called Dead Poet Society, great title by the way, where Robin Williams plays an English professor. And in one of the lectures in the movie, he tells the students this.
A man is not very tired, he is exhausted. And don't use very sad. Use, come on, Mr. Overstreet, you twerp.
Morose?
Exactly, morose. Now, language was developed for one endeavor, and that is, Mr. Anderson, come on, are you a man or an amoeba? Mr. Perry.
To communicate.
No, to woo.
The audience. What Robin Williams is saying here is kind of relevant to this video's topic. When you try to present something professionally, like in the form of a movie title, you want to articulate yourself accurately. And following Robin Williams' advice, I think, is kind of a good way to get there. So, all I'm asking is that movie studios, movie executives, start following this advice. I really just needed to get this topic out of my system, I think, before I made any other video. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter much. You probably don't care, or you might even heavily disagree. Let me know in the comments what you think, because we've reached the end of the broadcast. I hope you decide to return to watch our next episode, but until then, thank you and good night and thank you.